Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
This is our second day of our spring Sesshin. So lovely to see you all here. I'm so grateful for your practice, that you have shown up in this way to try to clarify your life. I'd like to talk about not looking away this morning. I think that is our practice, is to not look away. And the best way to do that is to be still. What kind of moment is this? Bright light of clear, crisp air of spring, promise of spring, buds coming up, new life appearing, and people being murdered in the streets of Ukraine. But what kind of moment is this? Can we pick and choose which moment we want? Can we pick the light over the dark? Good over evil? It's possible we could think that when we do a retreat like this, we're retreating from the world. We are. We're stepping back from the world, but we could think that we're here to find peace and something pure. The Dharma is pure, indeed. And that we shouldn't talk about such things as war or murder or killing or rape or injustice. We shouldn't talk about such things here because we should only talk about the Dharma. But what is the Dharma? How could the Dharma exclude those things? Why do we have this practice if we exclude all those things which are upsetting and are horrific and break our hearts? So here we are, in this moment, in the relative safety of this Buddha hall or your respective apartments and homes. We have everything we need to support our lives. We have food, water, clothing, heat. Yet we're often not satisfied. We feel like we're missing something. Well, what are we missing? What is missing? I'm so grateful you're here, really. I'm sorry I'm emotional this morning. It's I got a box of Kleenex here, just in case. To clarify who we are is to really see that we're not anybody that we thought we were. And that's liberating. One of my favorite quotes of one of my teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche, was, he said, "Enlightenment is the plane is going down. The plane is going down." You know, the Lori, what's her name, the artist, plane is going down. Yeah, Lorianne, this is your captain speaking. The plane is going down. And the bad news is you don't have a parachute. The good news is there's no ground. That might not seem like good news, that there's no ground to land on. But that's the good news of the Dharma. There's no ground to land on. There is no ontological thing you can say or establish as being the ultimately true thing here that you can hang on to, including yourself. So if you're not who you think you are, then you could be anybody. You could be everybody. You could be an evil genius, if there is such a person in the world. You could be that guy, or him, or her, or me or you, or Trungpa, or Trump, or Putin, or anybody. There's a beautiful quote here by Thich Nhat Hanh. Let me read it, let me find it. See if I have it. I wrote it down. Yeah. Continue practicing until you see yourself in the cruelest person on earth, in the child starving, in the political prisoner. Practice until you recognize yourself in everyone in the supermarket, on the street corner, in a concentration camp, on a leaf, in a dewdrop. Meditate until you see yourself in a speck of dust in a distant galaxy. See and listen with the whole of your being. If you are fully present, the rain of Dharma will water the deepest seeds in your consciousness, and tomorrow, while you are washing the dishes or looking at the blue sky, that seed will spring forth, and love and understanding will appear as a beautiful flower. Our practice is to be still and not look away. If we look away, I think what we then experience is a kind of moral injury to the deepest part of who we are. And so to be who you truly are is to not look away. And to do that, you have to open your heart and then break your heart. The Poles have a wonderful saying, and by the way, the Poles are doing some just amazing, wonderful work taking in refugees from Ukraine. And they have a saying, the only whole heart is a broken heart. You can't open your heart without having it broken. There's no way to do it. It's gonna break. And why would we want to defend against opening our hearts? To live such a small life where we pick and choose. Oh, I only want to see what's beautiful. I don't want to see the horrible things. It's both beautiful and horrific together. That's the Dharma. It's Auschwitz. It's Disneyland. So understandably, these are really difficult times. It seems like every time I give a talk, I say that. These are difficult, but these are historically difficult times now. We have moved into another, I don't know what. It seems like they're difficult times, but everyone has probably always said that. I'm thinking of my parents, and probably if you're old and as my age, then your parents also probably went through World War II. And I never thought to ask my parents what that was like for them. I know that my grandmother was really tough. She was a tough nut because she went through the Depression and raised 3 daughters. So she had a different outlook on life than I had. I grew up pretty privileged, in the post-war decade when America was confident and brimming with hope and enthusiasm and kind of can-do spirit. So we're living through a pandemic, and we're on the verge of we don't know what, world war, dystopian future. It's unsettling. So fear may rise in us. And this practice gives us an opportunity to look at fear, something like fear. Really look at it. See it for what it is. So, in order to be free of fear, we have to first of all look at it when it comes up. Where is the fear? Is it inside? Is it outside? No one's going to be bombing this building anytime soon, I don't think. So I'm not afraid of being bombed, but we still have fears, don't we? Can you touch your own fear? What are you afraid of? Ask yourself what you're afraid of. Just name one thing. Public speaking. What are you afraid of? Making a mistake? Being a failure? Be found wanting in some way? People wouldn't like you? Of being embarrassed? What are you afraid of? You afraid of dying? Being sick? Fear is real. We can't discount it. Sometimes it's a kind of nervousness. Sometimes it's a anxiety that doesn't seem to have any source. It's kind of free-floating anxiety, like something is the matter, but I don't know where it's coming from. Kind of existential angst. Fear is often related to feeling inadequate in some way, that I am inadequate. I'm not up for whatever is here. I can't rise to the occasion. I will be found wanting. And if people really saw who I am, I'd lose all my friends. There's that fear, isn't there? That kind of insecurity we have. If I was really to open my heart and be who I am, I would be found wanting. And I think that's a very deep fear of shame that's in our culture. And we probably all have it to some degree, some others more than others. And it's crippling. You may feel overwhelmed. And when we feel overwhelmed, we have strategies for dealing with it. We can take drugs. We can drink a lot of alcohol. We can binge watch the latest Netflix series, whatever. We all do it to some degree. We dull ourselves down so we don't have to feel this sad and tender heart. We don't have to feel the suffering of the world. So I think fear, on some level, is a kind of bewilderment and confusion that we're all subject to. And it's a kind of misalignment, or maybe we could say a unbalance within our body, mind, and heart. So you have to be really honest with yourself. You have to be really willing to look at your own confusion and bewilderment. And it's not comforting. It's unsettling. We want to be in control. We want to know. We want to fix things. We want answers. And life often doesn't give us those easy answers. We want things now. We're not patient. We want whatever the path is that we're on, we want to see it now. We want to have it. We want it to be clear. And sometimes it's not. Often it's not. Are you willing to be with the confusion? Meditation, it seems to me, what we are doing here is something very brave. We are willing to be with all of ourselves, every bit of it, the whole thing. The pain and the beauty, the horror, the confusion, the clarity, the whatever comes up, all of it. And to embrace all of our lives in this way is to be wholehearted, to really embrace and not to withdraw, not to look away, but to look at what's here without picking and choosing. So in this meditation, there's this grounded, embodied awareness, which is safe. This is a place of safety, and here you are never lost. Wherever you go, you are never lost. How could you be lost? Even if you're lost in the forest, you're still in the forest. You just say you're lost, but you're not really lost. So look at how our minds play tricks on us constantly, thinking something is so, when in fact, it may not be like that at all. We think we know what the world is or who we are, and we have all kinds of assumptions that come with that, but do we really know who we are or what the world is? So I think at a time like this, the three tenets is a very good practice to come back to, the basics: not knowing, bearing witness, loving action. It's not complicated. It doesn't mean it's easy to do as a practice, but start with not knowing. So if you really sit in not knowing and you bear witness to your own experience and whatever is outside, inside, then you may discover that the fear or the confusion or the being dispirited or disheartened or depressed may not be as solid as you thought it was. And in fact, when you don't turn away from the fear or the confusion, ends up being pretty transparent. And you find beneath that fear, beneath that something, whatever that is, seems so unmanageable, there is some sanity within you. And that sanity is unconditional. We could say it's some kind of basic goodness. You don't have to earn it. You already have it. We speak of that as your true nature, your Buddha nature. And our practice is to learn how to trust that. It's interesting that Zen was born at a time in China when there was a great deal of turmoil. In the 8th century China, in the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese had a very big border that they had to guard, and they didn't have enough people in their army to guard the border, so they outsourced their military. Sound familiar? Yeah, so they hired mercenaries from Mongolia to come in and guard the border for them, and the Mongols came and they got paid, and then at some point they decided not to go home, and a civil war broke out. It was called the Luchang Rebellion. It lasted for 1 decade. And in that decade of war, famine, and devastation, it's said that as many as 1/3 of the Chinese population died. 1/3. Can you imagine? And it was at this point that Zen actually arose as a spiritual path. And 2 great teachers in our lineage, really we might say really the heart of our lineage. 2 great teachers, one in the Solo tradition and one in the Rinzai tradition, came forth with this spiritual teaching of not looking away. Don't look away. Look at this. And one of them wandered in the burnout cities of the devastation. For years, he just wandered and did pilgrimage in the ruins. The poet Du Feng, who was trapped in the capital during that war, wrote the following poem. And the title of the poem was "The View This Spring." He wrote, "The nation destroyed, mountains and rivers remain. Among all those ruins, burnt buildings, bodies, cadavers, the smell of death, still, the river runs through it. The mountains are standing. Birds are singing. Spring comes. This is the moment we are in right now, right here." So this world is both impermanent, subject to change, and it is not. There is something here that is eternal and unconditional. We speak of this as the Dharma, as your sanity. You don't possess it. You can't lose it because you never possessed it in the first place. It's already who you are. It's who you are before you think about who you are. Can you trust that? We have a Zen koan which goes, show me your true face before your parents were born. So the two teachers that emerged at this time were, in China, were Mazu Dai, or Ma. He was in the Rinzai school. And then the other one was Shitao Shichen, or Sekito Kisen. And he is the author of the poem that we chant in our, the Identity of Relative and Absolute that we chant in the morning service. It's a beautiful poem. He wrote that poem. And so Shitao could have been a hermit. He built a small meditation hut close to a monastery. He probably shouldn't have done that. And he lived he built this hut on a flat rock, which is where he got his name, Stonehead. Not Stonerhead, Stonehead for the rock. Not Stoned Head, but Stonehead. And unfortunately, he would have been very happy as a hermit, but he eventually got pulled in to the monastery because they needed him. And he couldn't say no. He couldn't turn away. This was a monastery on one of the 5 holy mountains in China. It's on South Mountain in, I think, Huainan province. So he was deeply influenced by Taoism and Huayan, Buddhist school of the interdependence of life, of all things. And as the war and the civil strife went on in China and all the chaos that came with that, he became convinced that kind of sectarian differences that people have between politics, between religion, were not helpful. That attaching to those points of view, those differences, was leading to more turmoil and more strife. So he's the one who said, in the way, there is no northern or southern ancestors. People in the north of China were pretty cultured. People in the south were less cultured. And they both didn't like each other so much. They had, the northerners thought the southerners were barbarians, and the barbarians thought the northerners were stuck up, So nothing changes. We're still like that today, aren't we? Northerners and the southerners, the Yankees and the southerners. So Shitao developed a very gentle, kind way of teaching, but to the point. He was very direct. So I'll give you an example of a couple of his interactions with students. He always encouraged his students to question everything, and especially to question their assumptions and their beliefs. So a student asked Shitao, What about liberation? What about enlightenment? And Shitao replied to the monk, who binds you? Another monk asked Shitao, what about the Pure Land? The Pure Land was a school in Buddhism, the Pure Land school. And Shitao responded, who corrupts you? A monk asked Shitao, what about nirvana? And Shitao replied, who keeps you in the cycle of birth and death? The monk asked him, what am I supposed to do? And Shitao said, why are you asking me? A monk asked Shitao, where can I find what I'm looking for? Where else can I find what I'm looking for? And Shitao replied, are you sure you lost it? And then Ma was in the Rinzai lineage, and he developed strategies in Zen that are famously known in the Rinzai school, which were much more rough and shouting and kicking and hitting and so, unfortunately we don't do that here at the Zen Center. At least we haven't yet. You never know. Wait till tomorrow. But we're generally in the Soto school, which is a gentler way of Shitao, of practicing and being together. But the point here is that both of these teachers were saying, don't delay in clarifying your life. Life is precious. We don't know when we're gonna, when a missile may bomb our place, or we may fall over from a heart attack or a stroke or whatever. You don't know. So don't dilly-daddle about this practice. Take this seriously, life and death. This is your life, your death. So get to it. Chop, chop. Chop wood, carry water. Come to Sesshin like you're doing here. You watch the news forever and you just get totally depressed. You'll hear the news whether you watch it or not. You'll know what's going on. It'll seep through the pores of the. We'll hear it. We'll hear it. It's everywhere. Not to turn away from the news, not to turn away from reading and learning, but there is a time to be still. There's a time to be let go of our knowing and all the ways we want to figure it out. There's nothing to figure out here. War is incomprehensible. There's nothing to figure out. It's as old as humanity. We've been doing wars ever since we've been on the planet. It's too bad we're doing one now. Seems like a real step backwards. But this is the moment we're in, spring. And people are being murdered in Ukraine. So don't look away, but also don't get stuck in the darkness either. Don't look away, but don't get stuck in the mud. Our practice is to not look away, but not get stuck in the suffering. And that's the practice of bearing witness. We don't get stuck in being disheartened or delusioned or dismay or outrage, those are all places we can get stuck. When you bear witness, when you don't look away, you allow whatever that experience is to be here fully. And when you look at it fully, it loses its solidity and its grip on you. It's not so sticky anymore. We all know what that's like, to be disheartened by the world we're in. It's disheartening, but you can be stuck there. So when we bear witness, the suffering, it percolates. We move through it. It's like dancing. We move through it. When June and me were at Auschwitz, one of the things I really grew to love about Jewish practice, and Rabbi Singer would lead us in the Kaddish at a wall where people had been summarily executed. It was a horrible place. And we would do the Kaddish there, and we sing the Kaddish. When you sing and move, when you're doing it, it's hard to put it into words, but you're moving with the suffering, and you're moving it. You're not being stuck in it. It's not sticky. And you have this, your sad and tender hearts right here. It's always here. And we keep closing down, thinking that that's going to be safe, but that's not safe. The looking away is the way that we create moral injury for ourselves. And the way to be dignified, the way to be truly who you are, to be awake in this horrible, horrific, dysfunctional, dystopian, beautiful, magnificent world, is to open your heart to all of it. All of it. So I'll leave you with the last poem by Brad. Brad's last name, Hunter. Brad Hunter. Just did a beautiful workshop with us on death and dying with his wife. And Brad is a very deep Buddhist practitioner, and he wrote this poem the other day. My failure is almost complete. Non-becoming is the greatest success. Being no one is the sublime ease. As the body continues its inevitable slide toward compost and dust, my name escapes me. My life's work dreams of a forgotten shore. The radiance of a timeless moon dawns in the heart. I rest in the light of the unborn, untouched by the ravages of time and form. Just the other side of birth and death. No birth, no death. You have some questions or comments or anything you want to share? And if someone can take the microphone around. Yeah. Anybody?
I was just going to say in the very beginning. I have one.
Oh, okay.
I have one. In the very beginning, when you started to cry and you apologized for crying, I was wondering, is the apology really necessary? I mean, these are tough times we are in. And, you know, I think that's another way of somehow stopping something.
Well, I had to give a talk.
Well, I mean, I know you weren't gonna, you know, all out go on the floor.
You want to watch me cry here for an hour?
Yeah,
I could probably do that.
We'll probably cry with you.
Yeah. You know, I was in one of the early retreats I did at the Zen Center Los Angeles in the early 70s. We had really intense retreats, and I was thinking of that. You know, we say, you know, no unnecessary talking, but there's no rule that says you can't laugh or cry. And someone was crying, sobbing. We had about maybe 50 people in the Zendo, and it was intense. It was probably the third or fourth day of the retreat. Someone was sobbing, and one of the monitors said, "Okay, everyone cry." And we all started crying. I thought I was an insane asylum. I thought I was gone mad. Everyone was crying, sobbing in the Zendo, all together. 10, 15 minutes. So, yeah. We can cry, we can laugh. I can cry and laugh, but I also have to give a talk.
But and we can also take time out for sorrow.
Do. I have a lot of it, and I have a lot of grief, and
sure, I
still have a lot of work to do there. Yeah.
Kind of going off what June said a little bit, towards the beginning of my practice here, I think it was my second class of the Foundations of Mindfulness, I was experiencing a lot of sorrow, and I remember we were doing a check-in and I started crying, and instinctually I said I was sorry. And you said, "Don't be sorry." There's strength in a sad and tender heart. And that really sticks with me. And I used to be so ashamed of like crying and being overwhelmed with sadness. And now that I look at it like that and, you know, have really practiced looking at it like that and actually believing it, I find that I'm not really overcome by unstoppable tears anymore because there's no shame in it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but now I kind of view it as a source of strength and something for me to lean on when I'm feeling overwhelmed, is the fact that I can be vulnerable and sad and also present.
No.
So thank you.
Yeah. I hate it when people give me my teachings back to me.
I wasn't going to say anything until June said something. I was like, maybe this is a Dharma gate, and I vowed to open it.
Last month. Yeah, no, we could talk about some stories from Ukraine, and I'm sure we would all be crying pretty soon. Mark?
Thank you for the Teisho. One of the things you said early about fear made me start to think about, I haven't fully thought this through, but you know, of the things of which we're afraid, to what extent are we perpetuating them in some way? So if we're afraid of being shamed,
you get shamed.
Are we shaming others? Or if we're afraid of, being hungry, are we doing enough to help
project what you're afraid of?
Or are we doing, or are we doing enough to help others with their hunger? Or are we? Anyway, that was something that came to my mind. To what extent does that fear kind of reflect, opportunity for us maybe to do more to address those?
There's a way in which we project our deepest insecurities and inadequacies onto others. Yeah, so if you don't trust your own sanity, you have a hard time seeing or trusting it in others. Yeah, I think that's true. So I think, and we talk a lot about this window of tolerance in the foundations. When you have a narrow window of tolerance for whatever your experience is, it might be fear or it might be anger. Anger is the one I usually use because we can all relate to that one. If you have a narrow window of tolerance for anger, then not only are you go out of balance when you have anger, you act out or you contract and withdraw, kind of stuff it, but you're also not able to deal with people around you that are angry because you can't deal with your own. So if someone in your environment is angry, you find that extremely threatening and will have defense mechanisms to not deal with that very skillfully. But if you can deal with your own anger, if you've worked through and you can be okay with being angry and you then you move through it. It's sort of like bearing witness. You don't get stuck in it in the same way. You can have it. You see kids do this all the time. They're angry, and then the next minute they're laughing, and how did they do it? And so you can move through the anger or the fear in such a way. You can have it and then move through it, and then you can be more skillful with other people. You can give no fear to people that aren't in fear. You can be that. We all feel kind of helpless, like there's nothing we can do, but we can do a lot. We can be a calm person in a storm, and when you're in a boat with a lot of people that are all panicking, and you're the one person that's calm, you're giving no fear. That's something. Yeah. So we can all do small acts of kindness. It's not like we have to do some big dramatic thing to save, but small things, working with our fear, working with our anger, and moving through it so that we can do something kind or generous to someone around us. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone online? Come on, you're here too. We see you. Anything? Comments? Questions? Questions about practice? Anyone?
So it's not turning away from your own emotions as well that arise, that
Yeah.
are not turning away.
Yeah, not turning away.
Not apologizing necessarily either.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yeah, turn that.
Because grief is a hard one. I have a hard time. Fear of losing control and falling on the floor and crying, uncontrollably. I have that fear. And I think there's a lot of grief bottled up as a result.
No, I think there's an enormous amount of grief that we're all carrying for the planet, for all kinds of things. And I have touched it from time to time, but it does feel very large.
Yeah, so there's not knowing, and there's bearing witness, and then there's right action, or
Loving action.
Loving action.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, and this isn't so much on a bigger scale, but a more personal scale. Just thinking of something that's coming up for me in this retreat that feels like, I think shame's a good word for it, and there's the just recognizing it, feeling it. But how do we know what's the right loving action, on the other side of it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeremy. I don't think you necessarily have to know what the loving action is going to be, because I think it comes organically out of the practice of not knowing and bearing witness. When you practice not knowing, it connects, and then you engage with whatever situation you're in with other people. You're present to the situation more accurately, because if you're practicing not knowing, first of all, you're putting aside your own assumptions and your interpretations, and you're opening to the situation in a fresh way, right? And then then you bear witness with that, you stay with whatever you find there, without adding more complications to it, and then you're seeing the situation more accurately, and that puts you in a much better place to now have a more skillful response, which is going to move in the direction of compassion, because we're naturally compassionate when we're trusting our deeper sense of who we are as a dignified human being that's basically good. We're naturally compassionate. So the loving action isn't something you have to figure out so much. It happens naturally. It's like Bernie used to say, if you have you know, if you cut your hand, your right hand, your left hand is gonna go and stop the bleeding. You don't say oh, the right hand's not as good as my left hand, so I'm gonna let it bleed out. You don't do that. And it's the same thing with compassion. You don't, if you have the means and the skill to help someone not suffer more, you will do it. You will naturally do that. If you don't have if someone needs a blanket and you don't have a blanket, you can't give them a blanket, but you could maybe go find one, or you could be with them in some way that might be helpful. So I think the loving action isn't something we necessarily have to figure out. It's already here when we're here in that way. That makes sense? Yeah. I think we can be overwhelmed before we even begin when we're in the kind of situations we're often in. If you're not willing to let go of your knowing, that stops you before you even get started. You can just say, and shame will do that. Say, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not compassionate enough. We all feel that. All of us have some sense that we're not loving and compassionate enough. And religions really make you feel like that too. You should be more compassionate. Then you feel, okay. You feel guilty right away. Oh boy, if that priest could really see me, they would see how selfish I am, So you feel inadequate and so religion often makes us feel guilty. I think that we're not compassionate enough. Like compassion is something we have to do, but there's no place in the brain that is a place that triggers compassion. It's an emergent quality that comes when certain situations are met. And those situations generally have to do with empathic connection with others. When we are connected and present in an empathic and grounded way with an intention, it makes it much more likely that compassion is going to arise in that situation. It's going to emerge because we're creating the ground for that to happen, so to speak. But it's not some particular quality we cultivate so much. Yeah. So we do a grace training here. I'll do a workshop on it in, I don't know, when is it, Michael? A couple of weeks? Next month? That is a way of learning how to be more, first of all, to be resilient when you're working with other people and you're working with their suffering, to not get upregulated and triggered by their suffering. When you get upregulated, then you burn out. And part of our practice is really to learn how to manage and regulate our energies so that when we're in the presence of enormous suffering, that we can be skillful and be with that person in a way that's helpful without getting triggered and burn out. And I think sometimes people speak of compassion burnout. I think it's not the right word. I don't think when we're really grounded in compassion, we're very resilient. We can draw boundaries and we can work with suffering without being burnt out. We get burnt out when we're in the presence of suffering empathically without an intention connected to what we're doing, and then we get taken over by it. That's what I mean by not looking away, but not looking in a way where you get stuck in it, where you get stuck in the suffering. So part of the skill of our practice and why we practice is to learn how to be compassionate in a way where we don't get triggered and we can stay and be of service to others. What you do every day, right? And deal with the people that are irritating and you like some better than others, but you treat them all with a kind of equal kindness, even the ones that are difficult. Yeah. Maybe that's enough for now. So I think it's time for lunch. So we'll take a break and come back at 3 o'clock. If you are doing this retreat part-time, like a 3-day retreat, then please follow the schedule, whether you're here in person or you're online, and make sure that you show up for the 3 o'clock sitting and really ground yourself and root yourself in this meditation practice. Use the opportunity of this retreat to strengthen your own spiritual path and your meditation practice. There's great strength in doing this together. And I know it's maybe harder sometimes when you're doing this online, because you're in your own private place, and even though you're doing it with us, it's easier to cut corners or to be distracted by things in your home. So try as much as you can to put aside those shiny objects, whatever they are, around your computer. We all have them, and really try to commit yourself to being fully present in your practice for the remainder of this retreat, and then we'll all support each other in that way.
Do you want to talk about the practice of immediacy now?
Yeah, I could. If you've been sitting regularly and you've been doing all the scheduled sittings, then you could. You're welcome to do the practice of immediacy this afternoon, anytime between 3 and 4:30. You could sit for part of that time, and for part of that time you could do the practice of immediacy. And what the practice of immediacy is you stop meditating and you go to some place in your house where you use some medium like paper or paint or watercolors or drawing or journaling or music, poetry, photography, found objects, anything can be a mirror. Anything you use is a medium that can mirror what your state of mind is in the present. So it doesn't matter what the medium is, you pick one that you have a preference for, and then you use that medium, not to be necessarily artistic or do something that everyone will like or say, oh, that's beautiful. You actually use that medium to mirror honestly what your current state of mind is. So let's say you were in a place of fear, then you would paint, and you were painting, you would paint the fear. So you can't fail when you do this practice. You paint or draw or write whatever. If you're writing, you just write, whatever is present in your awareness or what you hear in your environment. A bird's tweeting, you write down, tweet, tweet, tweet. If you're drawing and you're looking at a blank canvas or paper and your first thought is, gee, I can't do this. There's shame talking. I'm not an artist. I can't create. This is terrifying looking at a blank piece of paper. Then draw that. You can't fail. Draw your terror. Draw that. Jagged lines. It's all really ugly. Draw it, fine. That's a practice of immediacy. And you might think of it as being a distraction from your meditation, but my experience of doing this over the years has actually deepened your meditation practice if you really enter into it wholeheartedly. But it's an option. You don't have to do it. You can choose to do it at any time going forward during this retreat, as long as you're in it. We usually wait and have people sit a full day to really be grounded in the practice before you start the practice of immediacy. So the reason I hesitated to bring it up, because I know some of you have been missing some of the sittings. So if you've been missing the sittings, I would recommend that you recommit to the sitting first, and then maybe do the practice of immediacy or try it out tomorrow. But you're welcome to try it out today if you feel so inclined. It tends to build with each passing day of the retreat as well. Any questions about that? And so you could use part of the afternoon sitting to do the practice of immediacy, and you could do part of it to sit. It's up to you. Okay, so the formal sitting will start again at 3 p.m. Thank you.